Hi everyone, I'm Airier, and today we're going to be checking out the BattleTech lore, Age of War, the complete 500-year history by Sven Vanderplank. Now, last time around, BattleTech's early eras, when the Terran Alliance, not a Federation, because I got Star Trek confused with it, was around, was weird. And it's like, we're great! Also, Paper Tiger, which is something that came up a lot in later BattleTech history. It's like they repeated ideas, but differently. Like, without the war crimes, which apparently is why it collapsed, because of a lack of war crimes. Yeah. Now we're going to get into the rise of Kurita, which I'm very curious to see how this is going to start, because I'm getting the distinct impression every single one of these houses now is incredibly different from what they are later, in usually, admittedly, incredibly ironic ways. Like how Lao was founded on libraries and sharing information and self-defense. And not stabbing each other in the back, actually helping. That is still weird to me. Yeah. Otherwise, you guys know the deal. There's a link below to the original video. Hit it up. And let's just jump right in and see what happens.
The founding of the Free Worlds League in 2271 into the first true interstellar superpower was arguably the most significant event of the 23rd century. But around them, the chaotic and erratic birth of new nations was continuing as normal. Their spinward neighbours, the Capellan hegemony, themselves...
Spinward, that's the term, because it's going up into the arc, so it's actually downspin is where... Okay, sorry, they're actually... I'm still getting used to the terminology of inward, outward for core word. I guess spinward. I don't know what the other two would be yet. One is in, one is, I guess, to the right?
Themselves founded only 1 year prior, were about to enter a period of growth that would in later years be referred to as the Capellan Renaissance.
Oh?
This was chiefly a cultural evolution that would lay the groundwork for the later Capellan state, as the hegemony began to make tentative alliances with other emerging powers in the region. However, the hegemony was an expansionist nation at heart, and they first set their sights on their immediate neighbours in the Ingersoll Concordium.
Okay, yeah, now this is definitely more what I was expecting. Yeah. Okay, never mind, we're getting back to, okay, this is still Lao, it's not too weird yet.
A brief campaign in 2272 saw them annex this microstate in its entirety. Spurred on by this success, they next moved against the St. Ives Association the following year, further expanding their empire. By the end of the century, they had established new provinces across the region, but in so doing had created problems for themselves. The Capellan hegemony was a scattershot of different planetary groups on an hemisphere map. The different provinces were accessible only by traversing other nations, which were at times hostile to them.
On the one hand, that seems like an incredibly dumb idea, because you have to literally go through what is very much hostile territory to get to where you want. On the other hand, if they're expansionists, that's probably intentional. It's like, hey, don't worry, you're next.
Defending this region from the predations of others both within and without the Capellan zone became an ever more challenging task.
Well, the within part never stops.
Meanwhile, the Free Worlds League was making territorial gains of its own. In the Articles of Unification, it was outlined that each of the three provinces would be responsible for a particular aspect of government. Orient would handle diplomacy, Regulus would manage trade, and the Commonwealth would be responsible for defense.
Oh, jeez, that... I'm sure that doesn't ever... One specific one handles defense, so they literally have all the guns pointing at everyone else's back. On the other hand, without trade, you don't have bullets. Unless they're very good at making them themselves. But then they still have to trade it to where they need to go. Trade is really good at buying other people to help out. Defense is really good at not needing other people to help out. And diplomacy is actually also really good at making sure other people don't want to help out. It would be balanced, but there's no way this doesn't go badly, because it's the freaking... the Free Worlds League. I don't think it's ever not going to be a giant pile of backstabbery.
During times of war, a Captain General will be elected to temporarily control all functions of the League to help them through the conflict. The first instance of this was the war with the Stuart Confederacy, and naturally, House Marek was the clear favourite for this position. On September 19th, 2293, the Free Worlds League began a 4-month campaign.
I literally just realized Marek is the planet right in the middle of that confederacy up there. I just noticed that. Wow, there's so many different planets. Second chance. What happened to the first chance?
That would see them annihilate the Stuart dictatorship and absorb its worlds as a 4th province. How Stuart would survive to the present day, its war long forgotten, and now acting as a staunch supporter for House Marek.
Wait, they weren't annihilated? Oh, this feels weird. Like, again, I'm used to war crimes o'clock, and these are just wars, not, okay, this planet's now not usable anymore, level of bullshittery.
In the Rimwood region of the Inner Sphere, the independent worlds were at last beginning to form their own interplanetary states.
Oh?
This began with the merger of several sky-based trading conglomerates in 2296 to form the Sky Traders under the control of Ian McKeeston. Such was the power of this new group that they were able to claim de facto governorship of a group of planets near the
Okay, yeah, this one I remember. That, of course, Steiner was based around trade. It's also probably the most consistent of all the houses in that money is a very consistent factor. So if I'm right, didn't they have some of the initial points of Rochelheg? I can't understand how to say it either way. I don't know. Everyone says it differently. Really cool seeing it just move around here. And already it's the first one really bumping up right against the Terran, I guess, hegemony at this point.
Terran Alliance.
Oh.
Over the next 3 years, they would transition from Trading League to Interstellar Nation, and so was born the Federation of Sky in 2299.
Oh, it's not Steiner yet, it's the Federation of Sky. Oh, that's cool.
To conclude the development of the 23rd century, the Marlat Association was formed in 2278, and the Principality of Rasalhague was reformed in 2299 from the old Rasalhague Consortium.
So he says Rasalhague. There's a really big accent difference between that and the game. Also, his probably is more accurate, just because this guy seems to know everything he's talking about.
Kick things off in the new century, after splitting from the Sky Traders, Seth Marsden established Donegal Freights in 2301 on that selfsame planet.
Cameron.
In due course, his trading empire would become the final of the three powers in that region of space.
Oh?
On the other side of the Inner Sphere, on distant New Samarkand,
it's just a circle.
One family was bringing the previously opposed city-states together into a unified world government. Emerging on the scene as the Lord of Yamashiro, Shiro and his brother Urizen were about to establish a dynasty that would survive the next 700 years of turmoil into...
Okay, I need to pause for a second. What the hell is this? Bob2789. Dunkel Walder Dunkel Florscher Slaffer Schattenwelt. Sorry, Schattenwelt. My apologies. Bob. I see someone saw Titan AE.
To the present day. Raised in a family with deeply traditional and martial values, the two brothers would go on to proudly wave the banner of House Kurita.
Called it!
The Kuritans had dreams of founding a militaristic superstate and began working towards this goal by reaching out to nearby Galadon, the major...
Oh, they were doing this immediately as military. Okay, I thought there was some kind of change. No. Kurita from beginning to end has always been basically what the clans are, just trying harder. And technically more successful because they have a bigger portion of the galaxy. The Inner Sphere, at least. Huh. So it went military immediately.
Major power in that region of space. Though Galadon was a successful colony, they played second fiddle to the Ozawa Mercantile Association. This massive organization dominated the entire quarter and had grown fabulously wealthy, often at the expense of the individual worlds they did business with.
Nothing
the
changes.
Planets, including both Galadon and New Samarkand, had grown dependent on the OMA, but also chafed under their influence. When Shiro Kurita arrived on Galadon in 2302, he cast the Ozawas as their common enemy and proposed an alliance to help them free themselves from the control of this powerful trading family. Using well-placed flattery, Shiro suggested this new partnership would take the name the Alliance of Galadon, and proposed that he would take command of a new military force to wrest control of their planets from the OMA.
Oh.
With the agreement in hand, he turned to other nearby planets.
So he's literally within a trading alliance and starting up a military power to overthrow it. Huh. I mean, yes, it's still them, it's still military, it's still exactly what you expect. But they're the underdog?
Approaching the governments of Dnepropetrovsk and Sverdlovsk, the former willingly adding their strength to the alliance. A hastily armed fleet of ships began to board and impound any Ozawa vessels that entered the region, with each captured jump ship adding to their navy. The stolen goods were in turn used to grow the size of their military in anticipation of coming events.
And the best part is, as long as you take a jump ship, you have entire weeks before someone realizes, oh no, they should be here by now, because they take so long between trips. Honestly, you would basically need an entire fleet of jump ships working in tandem to just transfer things like the Pony Express, essentially, to make any efficient usage of it at this point. Or at any point. I don't think they do that because they're so fucking expensive. It takes way more coordination than I think Star League, for a good portion of the history, would ever want anyone to get. And let's be honest, I'm pretty sure they could do it, but yeah, Star League, fuck them. But also, Hyatt was awesome. It's complicated.
When the OMA realised what was happening, they began first by boycotting the Worlds, but then switched to a public relations campaign that saw Kurita start to lose his grasp. Shiro was not prepared to fail now though, and in a move that shocked everyone, resulted to the terrorist bombing of all Ozawa Mercantile Association facilities on the planet Galadon within a single day.
Oh. So it wasn't that the PR campaign's working, it's that fuck you. God damn, that is an entire planet of just that. I mean, to be fair, we know what comes next. It's less, here's an entire facility taken out. It's more, here's an entire planet that's no longer got a biosphere. Yeah, it does actually feel sometimes that somehow the inner sphere is more antsy with the planet destruction than 40K can be. Yeah, I'm really getting that opinion. It's kind of... I mean, that's mostly during the Age of War, which is what we're on right now. As things get more into the spaceship era, honestly, I'm looking forward to that because spaceship! I mean, not spaceship, dreadnought, battleships, whatever. Warships, that's the word. But it sounds worse than what comes next, even though we know objectively it's not actually worse because this is incredibly targeted. So it only hit the people they want. That said, what they want was everyone who opposed them on an entire planet. Damn.
There was little to no fallout from this, however, as over the last year he had cunningly replaced his opposition within the Galadon government after unearthing, or perhaps
so he basically just got rid of
evidence
a coup
of double dealing
without even needing
Ozawas,
to coup,
replacing them in turn with loyal supporters. The Ozawas were done, and though the organisation would survive for a time, they were forced to pay tribute to House Kurita. Not prepared to rest on their laurels, the brothers...
And of course they get it through subterfuge, which is actually kind of funny to me. Because Kurita is usually right in your face, going full charger to the wall, attack, and actually being very good at it. But yeah, Kurita was essentially established on subterfuge, and I was not expecting that.
His next move was to launch what was at the time the largest planetary invasion in history.
Okay, this sounds better.
50,000 Alliance troops descended on Sverdlovsk in a show of force that utterly crushed local resistance.
Wait, only 50,000? That's, I mean, it's not a small amount, but they have at least a few planets, but these planets are less established than Earth would have been, so their populations probably weren't nearly as high, so that might actually be a significant percentage. Also, I don't know how big jump ships were at this time, and how many troops they could actually move around. I know later, that's a lot. Hell, I know during significant portions of entire history, that's a lot. But during this period, I just don't know how efficient or how big jump ships were, or did that actually change at this point? It's one of those things I really wish there was more information on the technical side. I have to wait for text to get to that.
The actions of the Kurita brothers were about to become an afterthought in the histories of the time. Smoldering tension in the Capellan Zone was about to see the two dominant powers clash violently. This conflict would spill over into not only the other powers of the zone, but involve even the Free Worlds League and the forces of House Davion.
Oh.
In 2305, the Capellan hegemony finished drafting their plans for what they thought would be a preemptive strike against the Sana supremacy. Their best estimates suggested a 4-week campaign would bring the Sans to heal and deal with their hostile neighbour for good.
Could take a while, I guess it doesn't.
The Hegemony Supremacy War holds the dubious honour of becoming the first true interstellar war. Their presumed easy victory lasting not for 4 weeks, but for 4 years. The origin...
I mean, in human history, that's actually not that bad. There is a literal thing called the 100 Years' War, which admittedly wasn't 100 years of war. It was 100 years of simmering tension with very, very violent outbursts between them. So it's more like maybe 30 years of actual war, but still that's a lot. And maybe 70 years of... we kind of killed a few people. We kind of killed people back, and maybe a lot more than a few. And just general dickery. Just think Cold War, but with more actual blood. Because no one
the war lay with the secession of Palos and Wei from the Sana supremacy at the beginning of the year. Capella decided to support the independence of these two planets and offered to help defend them when Sarna came to reconquer their worlds. In February, the hegemony launched their...
I get they're doing it because, hey, now you're part of us, but also... how bad was the Sarna supremacy that running to Lao sounded like a better option? I mean, I realize this is a very different Lao, but it sounds wrong.
Doomed raid against Sana, and immediately bogged down when they met near fanatical resistance from the Sana militia.
Oh.
Reserves from all
These are
across
just
the
human level
supremacy were
fighting too,
recalled to
yeah.
the capital, and this stalemate would continue through to September when the Capellans withdrew. Meanwhile, the Sans were able to retake Palos, establishing themselves as an early favourite. Things got worse in October of 2305 when the geographical dispersion of the hegemony came back to haunt them. A sharp uptick in pirate action, clandestinely hired by Sana, saw the hegemony worlds of Redfield, Daniels, Lee, Ball and Highspire all come under attack, which in turn drew military forces away from the front lines.
And now this is not just a somewhat regional, but this is a much larger region because it's a significant proportion of distance. By comparison, how big some of these states are, at least.
These raids continued until reinforcements came from the neighbouring states of the Chesterton and St. Ives trading leagues. The Cluanian pirates launched an operation against Osha, but were caught recharging in the Alcyon system, where they were destroyed almost entirely in April of 2306.
Oh.
There was more positive news when Capellan troops were able to successfully defend Wei from the Supremacy forces, but troubling information soon came to light when it was discovered that the Cluanian pirates had been in league not just with the Sans, but the Davians too, perhaps in an attempt to...
Yeah, because later on he mentioned Davian is very much into piracy and terrorism to get exactly what they want. And early on, apparently they were doing that too, because they're just as vicious and authoritarian as everyone else at this point.
Further destabilize the region and expand their own influence. Seeking to forge further alliances of their own, the hegemony approached the Free Worlds League, and in May promptly signed the Ryerson Conventions. The League offered up fresh troops for the campaign, but these were soon found to be green and inexperienced. Meanwhile, the Captain General, Danak Salaj, began his own assault, taking control of Berenson and Wassat. The hegemony...
So he's... I'm sorry. What? I don't... You sign an alliance with an enemy... Sorry, your enemy's enemy. Okay, yeah, they're your friend, but it doesn't always... I'm sorry. The tactical decisions here are done by someone who wants to expand and thinking, okay, we send them the green troops that we don't care losing, so we get them in our bidet, and also they're paying us, maybe, depending on how the terms went. So we get the green troops over here, and while that's happening, let's go over here and expand. Because a war on at least two fronts is a great idea. I just realized there's also a second try and a second chance as well. Oh my god.
Germany was forced to implement oppressive legislation against their own citizens in an effort to maintain their struggling supply line and dwindling military might.
That
They
sounds
succeeded
familiar.
in part when the Capellans began their final phase of the war in December 2307. By September of the following year, they had succeeded in occupying 17 of the Sana worlds. However, their alliance with the
17. Okay, so these maps aren't actually completed, are they? Or are they just systems and there's individual planets within each system? That would actually make a lot more sense then. If that's the Sarna system, then it would be a lot more, because I'm assuming either these are much bigger or there's multiple planets. I'm definitely aiming more towards the multiple planets, because otherwise, I guess maybe the map wasn't as updated as I thought it was.
Free Worlds League had cast them as invaders as opposed to liberators of planets under the thumb of the Supremacy dictatorship. Though the Capellans had been able to win the support of the semi-independent Chesterton League, the Tikhonov Grand Union remained officially neutral.
Oh?
This was a stance encouraged by generous donations on the part of Sana towards certain influential figures within the Union. Tikhonov had its own problems during this period.
Oh?
For the past 4 years they'd been in conflict with the Marlet Association and lost several key worlds. In November 2308 they began their counterattack against the Marlets. Their initial moves met with great success, and by the end of the year they had retaken 2 of the lost Chesterton worlds. Meanwhile, the draconian measures undertaken by the hegemony government were about to catch up to them, when in the final month of 2308 the planet Arboris declared their independence. If the Capellans allowed this to go unanswered, it would set a dangerous precedent given how unpopular the current regime had become.
Huh. Draconian measures taken by the Lao becoming unpopular and people rebelling. It's good that we're finally getting back to things I understand that make sense.
The 2nd Andurian Reserve Fleet was promptly mobilized and moved from Zion to Arboris.
But it's also a lot of
en route to the planet, however,
right
they came upon
of
unexpected
places.
opposition in the form of the Liao merchant fleet. Arboris had been accepted as a protectorate state of the previously independent Liao. In the ensuing fleet action, the Capellans took
No, wait, I keep getting Lao and the hegemony because it's Sarna hegemony. Yeah, no, I'm still getting that backwards. It does not sound normal to me, and I'm just going to keep making that mistake. Wow.
Significant damage from the technologically inferior Liao ships, and by battle's end were in a state only to maintain a blockade around the planet Liao, abandoning the assault against Arboris. By early 2309, the Tikhonov invasion of the Marlet Association was continuing at pace, but the unexpected death of the general behind the campaign saw it fizzle out after less than a year. This was followed by the death of one of the ruling tetrarchs of the Tikhonov Grand Union, which in turn threw the nation into disarray. On the other side of the Sarna supremacy, the writing was on the wall for the Capellan hegemony and the ruling Aris family. The Free Worlds League had withdrawn from their alliance, and anti-government protests grew larger and more frequent. Their final victory came at Sakhalin in April of 2309.
Guess they sacked it.
But soon after, the Liao blockade was lifted, and in the following month, an armistice was reached.
Huh. Honestly, it's interesting how this is moving forward, because it really does show how tensions are rising, and even though these are, for the time, large interstellar wars, they seem almost more like border disputes by levels you're used to later. But I guess that's because the scale does change as population and control and power does ramp up.
The Tikhonov Grand Union came forward as a neutral arbiter, and by December the two sides agreed to peace. The end came on the final day of the year when Prime Magnate of the hegemony, Paula Aris, took her own life. In the aftermath of the Hegemony Supremacy War, there was new impetus among the nations of the Capellan Zone to unify in the face of threats without.
And that is where their hyper-controlling internal policies come up. Also, Tikhonov's up here. It's so weird, because like over here is New Avalon, and just like, oh yeah, Heart of Davion. That's not Davion yet. We got all these other things, the places that I think become Davion, and dude, it's so much different than the star map I'm used to. And I keep coming back to this because it's so many changes, so much history to go through. And like Lao is probably the closest to looking like it if you squint really hard and ignore all of the gaping holes.
In 2310, the hegemony was disbanded as a part of the peace agreement and replaced with a Capellan commonality. Sick of internal strife, the major powers unified behind this banner, though each would retain internal control of their own nations.
Oh?
Across the sphere, Shiro Kurita was beginning the next phase of his expansion plan. By now, the Alliance of Galadon laid claim to more than a dozen worlds and had a fearsome reputation. Several neighbouring planets were also beginning to establish themselves as interstellar players around this point. Shiro began a diplomatic voyage that would see him visit many of these worlds, offering them membership in the Alliance.
But
promising to support them in their own territorial disputes and ambitions, Shiro was able to win the favour of all of his targeted planets.
Seriously?
Some even joined because of his impressive military record. By the time Shiro returned to New Samarkand, the size of his realm had exploded to include around 30 planets.
Oh. You know, I could see subterfuge. It's a little surprising because like the honor aspect of later Kurita. But the fact that the greatest expansion early on, to make them admittedly probably one of the biggest in sheer encompassing space in the inner sphere, was through diplomacy. If this is something Kurita encouraged more, that would actually be kind of insane. They're admittedly covering less entirely connected areas, but you can see how people will be very pressured to join in because other people willingly joined in, and the guy doing it has a good military record, so he knows that he can do the shit, and he's not a paper tiger like the Alliance for Terra was, or the Terran Alliance. Wow.
Unlike the other nations that were centralized around a single major world, the Alliance of Galadon was a tenuous chain of widely dispersed planets that stretched far towards the periphery. With no immediate rivals in the area, however, they were safe from attack for the time being. In early 2311 though, it became apparent to the newly joined members that Shiro would play them against each other when Daeron and Altair both threatened each other with Galadon's support. In response, the two worlds split from the Alliance and formed the Daeron Federation.
But
other planets followed suit, declaring their intention to leave the Union. In response, Shiro launched a major political purge that saw...
Okay, now this is closer to what I was expecting. More of the murder. Again, yeah, okay, we're back to normal now. It's just... On the other hand, it's getting rid of dissent, and, you know, they're dissenting because they realize he played them, which, I mean, that makes perfect sense. But anyone who does politics and diplomacy at all is not playing someone is doing it wrong.
Roughly half of all the planetary leaders, nobles, and diplomats within the Alliance of Galadon lose their lives. He then unleashed his brother Urizen to bring the errant worlds back in line. Benjamin would fall in late 2311, then Telos and Asgard the following year. The final days of the Terran Alliance were at hand by this point, the last of the minor nations to...
Oh, so this was still well before the Alliance collapsed. So they were still pretending, at least is probably the best word, to be a thing at this point.
Appear around them with the Protectorate of Donegal in 2313, which grew out of Marston's Donegal Freights, and the Duchy of Liao in 2315, having established a strong reputation for itself during the Hegemony Supremacy War. That same year also saw the final collapse of the Terran Alliance and its rebirth as the Terran Hegemony. In 75 years, the political situation had evolved to become unrecognizable to how things had been before the Outer Worlds Rebellion. Humanity was now at its most disunited with 24 different alliances and...
Yeah, only 24 different alliances. To give an idea, Earth has over 200 countries. And I might actually be under that by 100. I don't actually know, for example, what the exact number is. So just keep that in mind for perspective.
Resistance. The most powerful of these was the Free Worlds League, but Director General James McKenna had grand plans.
Yeah, I didn't hear anything bad happening, so maybe they're doing well.
His position was that the formerly independent worlds were nothing but an errant flock to be brought back into the fold. The 25th century would see him act on these plans, which triggered a chain reaction in the politics of the neighbouring regions. By the end of the century, less than half of the 24 interstellar nations that were around to see the birth of the hegemony would remain.
And that is basically the first war with Liao and an oppressive dictatorship where Lao was the good guys. Kurita, through diplomacy and admittedly sneaky non-honorable policies, became a massive player in the periphery because apparently, yeah, it's so centralized still. That far out is still just periphery space for what the inner sphere is right now. And this is a very information-dense episode. There's a lot of things that happen, and this is still just leading up to right now, right where that ended, where the freaking Terran Alliance only collapsed then. So they were technically all still part of the Terran Alliance in the, we're going to ignore that and no one's going to call us on it effect, which is literally how that happened. Because even though they didn't declare themselves separate, they were separate. And Terra may or may not have never even noticed at that point, which is, I thought this happened after they were declared independent because that means Terra was still sending support to these people, potentially at this point. I mean, probably the reason they failed is because they weren't, and they couldn't, and they were just trying to get things back. I want to know more about the economics of this now. Like, how was that working out? What were they giving out? What were they getting back? What were the incentives to do certain things? How was this done? What kind of warships do they have yet? Basically, this is the most comprehensive anything I've seen from this era of BattleTech, and I still want more. So yeah, I'm probably going to have to hit up Sarna after I finish this because I want to see what this is. I know Tex may or may not get to here in like another 80 years, and honestly, it'd be worth it. But I want to see what's happening so much sooner. I need to just go read and read Sarna because they have a great library there. Or, well, I guess digital repository is more accurate, but details library is fine. So yeah, I'm going to go do that. Also, I just saw the time. I am late to start a live stream. I should have already restarted. Oops. I will go fix that. Also, why did my face just become blurry? That is weird. How long has it been like that? We'll find out. All the same, thanks for watching, everyone. I'm going to run now and do that live stream, which I forgot about. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Adios.